Hello and welcome to this edition of the India Development Debate. I'm Nayantara Rai. Indian Railways trying to find a new track. It is seeking a course correction to curb the low tidings by shifting focus from traditional items of iron ore, coal, cement and food grains to new commodities like fly ash, finished steel and automobiles in a big way. But the national transporter generates most of its goods revenue from the transportation of coal, cement, food grains, as it mostly transports bulk freight. And the freight basket has pretty much been limited. The railway target is to earn 1.43 lakh crore rupees from the goods traffic in this financial year. Freight is crucial for the finances of the Indian Railways. We're now going to get you sound bites of the Railway Minister Piyush Goyal on the future of the Indian Railways and safety first, as well as the Railway Board Chairman V.K. Yadav talking about fares, particularly freight fares.
In the last 9 months, we have not had any casualty. That means nobody has died. No fatality. Casualties, injuries are there. No fatality. So in the last 9 months, from 1st April to now 25th, today 28th of December, till now we've had no fatality of any railway passenger. I think it's a great achievement by 13 lakh employees of the Indian Railways who work day and night through thick and thin.
Freight tariff. And today, 25% of our earning is going towards the payment of the pension. Our pensioners are more than the railway employees. So 25% of the earning is going towards pensions, and especially after the 7th pay commission. So suddenly there has been a problem, but I can tell you that only way to get this operating ratio set right, we will have to increase our earning, and if we want to increase our earning, we will have to increase our freight volume.
Well, there you go, Piyush Goyal, the Railway Minister, talking about how you have not seen a single accident this year, calendar year, which also means the first 9 months of the financial year. Safety first, of course, has been something the Modi government and Piyush Goyal have been spearheading. But today we're talking more about the overhauling of the railways. You just heard the Railway Board Chairman himself right here on ET Now. I'm going to take forward the conversation now with Ajay Shukla, the former Railway Board member, as well as Aashish Chandorkar, public policy analyst. Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Shukla, if I could come to you first. You know, you have, of course, held a very important position. You're a former Railway Board member. You're trying to change a 160-plus-year-old organization. It sounds great on paper. How difficult do you think this is going to be to execute? There will be redundancies, for example, that are going to be created if you want a leaner and a more efficient machine.
As far as execution part is concerned, it will definitely be difficult. But I think before we discuss the execution part, why don't we discuss the objectives of the whole exercise? Now, it is too early in the day to pass a judgment about whether the exercise is good or bad, because we do not know the details of the same, and the details have not even been worked out. But if the objectives are clear of putting railways back on track, then the whole exercise may be very good. Otherwise, I do not know. The execution part itself might create more problems than it solves.
Okay. Aashish, if I could come to you now, it's a massive overhaul. It's being seen as a very bold reform. I just asked this one question, what's going to happen to all the redundancies? And you've had the Railway Board Chairman indicate in the last 24 hours which way fares are going to head as a result of all of this.
Right. So this is definitely a major overhaul. Now, in any such program or any such transformation, there will be some change management required. There's no doubt about that. I think it's a good and a positive sign that the Railway Board Chairman has already sounded out the officers about the impending changes. Whether this is in the form of redundancies or not, I think it's too early to say, as Mr. Shukla pointed out. But certainly there has to be much more realignment of job duties for officers and different services. And I think the whole transition might take a year or two, and managing that transition will be very critical for success of this idea.
You know, if today, if you were to see a lot of the stocks, railway stocks, they were on steroids. That is a trend we have seen since this massive reorganization. So I'm going to ask the same question to both the experts I have on the channel today. Ajay Shukla, I'll start with you. The dream, of course, is to have a globally competitive Indian railways. We're also talking the same week that a Chinese state-owned railway company is tapping at the public markets, going in for an IPO of almost $6 billion. We are behind the curve. How crucial is this all going to be to make India competitive with the rest of the world with our railways?
As I said in my earlier statement, if the objective of the whole exercise is to make it more efficient, reduce the expenditure, because you see, the basic problem of railways is not departmentalism. Departmentalism is just one word. And in any big organization, departments will always be there. How can you have a situation where there are no departments? Now, departments have to perform certain functions. And the basic purpose and the basic problem of railways is that we are running operations at a very, very high cost. This increase of cost is leading to economic problems of the entire industrial sector. You know, our unit cost of transportation is among the highest in the world. The logistic component of a product, which is the consumer that pays for a product as far as the cost of transportation is concerned, is the highest in the world. This is pulling down the entire Indian economy. Our freight rates are among the highest in the world. Can we reduce these costs? If the entire objective of the exercise is to reduce those costs and so that it helps the national economy, then the whole exercise is worth the while. Otherwise, it is just changing structure from one structure to another structure, creating endless confusion for a long duration of time, putting officers in turmoil, then it will not be worthwhile. So we have to be very clear what objectives are we going to achieve and how we are going to achieve that.
Mr. Shukla, you know, you have been a board member of the Indian Railways. So I'm going to ask you this question. When this overhaul was announced, there were phrases used which such as to expedite rational decision making, expedite decision making, end departmentalism, bring about unification. Does this mean that before this overall, the decision making was indeed very poor at the railways? Is this an honest admission that is being made today?
No, I don't want to sound very personal as far as the railway minister is concerned, but I must say that he has been the minister now for 2 years. Only 6 months back, two additional posts of members were added to the railway board. And it was, of course, done with the recommendation and approval of the Honorable Minister. Now, was that decision incoherent? Was that decision irrational? I do not know how decisions are being taken in the ministry. So, to say that for last 150 years the decision making has been incoherent and irrational, that itself is a very wrong surmise. So we cannot go by those things. Yes, if the intention is to improve efficiency, improve the financial position of the organization, and ultimately help the Indian economy. Because remember, railways, the basic purpose of railway is to help the national economy. So if it helps the economy only, then it is worthwhile. Otherwise, it is just another one of the things which is regularly being done.
I take your point. Let me now go across to my other expert. Aashish, do you agree with what Mr. Shukla is saying? Or do you think, you know, as someone who's not been part of the system, that yes, the decision making was indeed not rational, the decision making was indeed not fast enough, and this is definitely the need of the hour?
See, if you look at the way Indian Railways has performed, I think we can all agree that we have not innovated at the speed at which we should have innovated. The technologies which we use today, or the customer facilities or amenities which we have today, still lag what's out there globally. So I think it's a fair comment to make that there is a room for improvement here. Now, whether that dates back to this month or this year or 15 years earlier, that's not really the point here. The fact is that for for the right functioning of an organization, the organization design is the most important factor, because that is what then leads to how people think, how they innovate, what ideas do they bring to the table. So purely in terms of making things much more efficient and taking a project view rather than a task view. Today, when there are departments, they are doing their individual tasks. Like let's say, let's go to a station master. Does he even like for even for a train to run in a station master has to interact with 8 or 10 different departments just to make a simple task happen, because it's he's just a coordinator. So when you go up the value chain and look at new design, bringing in new technologies, there has to be a single point of ownership to make some of these larger programs successful. I think this organization design, the new one, will definitely give an impetus. As I said earlier, of course, the execution and the transition remains very critical for the next couple of years. The workforce cannot be demotivated, but certainly I think the new org design itself lends well to bringing in new ideas in the system and for more efficient decision making.
And Ashish, if you look at this expenditure, the Railway Board Chairman in his interview to ET Now did concede the Railway spends 60% expenditure on HR. You've just had Mr. Shukla talking about how the freight rates are one of the highest in the world. So looking from that perspective, looking at the reorganization, isn't that definitely going to go a long way in making the railways more efficient, more competitive globally?
So this is not to say that one decision will itself suffice to do the full cleanup or put the path of put railways on the path of efficiency and profitability, right? This is one of the several things which needs to be done. But unless you get the organization design right, it is very difficult to bring about changes fast enough and impactful enough. Also, this is not a new idea as such. This discussion has been going on since I think Prakash Tandon committee was the first one to recommend this, which was in 1990s, mid 1990s. Most recently, the Vivek Devroy committee in 2015 recommended this, and I think in between there were also other committees headed by Sam Pitroda and a couple of other folks who also had pretty much arrived at the same conclusion that the right organization design is critical for making railway successful. So as such, this is the idea has been out there. It just needs to be implemented efficiently, and it needs to be ensured that whatever other measures are needed. I mean, this is not to say that this is a single point which will magically change things, but this ultimately this will need to be backed up by other decisions as well. But certainly the new structure lends itself very well towards more innovation, more idea sharing, and more ownership from the key people within the system.
Mr. Shukla, will you at least concede that if this reorganization is indeed a success, the railways will become more competitive, and therefore we could then move to part two of what would be an educated guess, the milestone that will be needed? Whether it is, for example, a partnership with the private sector to get them to run trains on routes, monetizing some of the routes, just getting the private sector involved in increasing the volume of freight as well.
You see, private sector is already deeply involved in railway functioning. Today, almost every technical thing which railway claims to be doing by railway technical people is actually only being done by private sector. The entire signaling which has improved, it is all being done by private companies and mostly foreign private companies. We are importing locomotives, we are importing other technology. In fact, the railway engineers are only processing the tenders and nothing else. There is hardly any technical input as far as the technical departments of railway are concerned. And that is the basic problem of railways. The earlier participant had spoken about the staff cost. Now, with technology, we have put in so much of technology, but we have not been able to reduce the staff. partly because different departments don't want to reduce their staff, partly no minister wants to take up the issue with the unions. As a result, despite having put so much of money into technology, despite so much of money of government and the taxpayers going into the organization, what has the country and the taxpayers got in return? They have only got higher freight rates and higher passenger fares. So this does not really signal anything good for the railways. If taxpayer money is going into capital investment, the people must get something in return by way of better services, lower freight rates. And I am very particular about freight rates because it is pulling down the entire economy. So if the technology input does not result in lower freight rates, then I'm sorry, this all talk of reducing departmentalism is not going to make much headway.
Ashish, come in over there. Yes, we have some involvement, but obviously the game plan is to have the private sector more involved without privatizing the railways. That does seem to be the mission and the vision of the Narendra Modi government. Now, why will the private sector enter if it's going to just have to deal with problems, if it's going to have to deal with just unions and a very inefficient machinery? I'm talking about the human machinery of the railways. Do you think with what has been announced, you will see the private sector being more enthused? And this entire idea of monetizing certain routes, getting the private sector to operate some of the routes?
See, I think the government has been clear that the private sector involvement essentially is only in specific areas. The infrastructure or the utility piece of railways will stay with the government. That's been the direction. But when you need new capital, when you need to reduce burden on your ability to take fast decisions or introduce new services, that's when you have to involve the private sector. So that's been happening via, let's say, the station redevelopment program, through innovative sources of revenue generation like renting out trains for movies, etc. I mean, that's a new idea. And of course, the new trains which the private sector is supposed to run. We have had one trial run between Lucknow and Delhi earlier. So these things will continue because in a growing economy and a system which is exploding in terms of both population and the requirements of urban commute, it's very difficult for the government to execute all pieces of it. So the private sector engagement is certainly going to be there. In fact, the new structure, when there is a more project-based execution in the new structure where all services are integrated and you're looking at a project as one single piece, you can actually more efficiently involve private sector in bits and pieces where it's relevant, where they either bring expertise or know-how or technology or just more efficiency. So I think the new structure also balances out that responsibility of government and the private sector.
We're also talking at a time, Ashish, when the rest of the world has far more modernized version of the railways, right? Look at the bullet trains. We keep talking about how we want to import that in India. The Hyperloop by Richard Branson is also trying to be in India. With what is happening and the announcement that has come, do you expect at least more technology to be imported? Will we see the newer trains in India?
Yeah. See, for completely different areas like bullet trains, we will certainly be importing some of this. Now, the current proposal, I mean, there's one bullet train project going on. That again is very clear that the first set of rolling stock will come from Japan, but then eventually a lot of that production will move to India. So India has this specific consuming power which we need to leverage, where we import technology to kickstart a project to scale it up rapidly. But once that is happening, then we essentially shift the production and the technology know-how to the Indian basis. I think the bullet train is a great example of that, and it's a great experiment as well, where Japan is funding the project at marginal cost, and then will eventually move production to India as well. So I think that model will likely continue, and I don't think railways can itself alone take the full ownership of that. There has to be private sector and foreign private sector engagement in some of those cases.
With that, gentlemen, I'm completely out of time, so I'm going to thank both of you for joining us this Friday on the India Development Debate. We're getting you, experts every single day to talk about this. A 166-year-old organization is being overhauled. It's going to impact yours, my lives. We're trying to get more investors, and let's see how this one pans out. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.